Welcome back to Audible Archives. I'm Rob, your host, guiding you once more into the shadows of Ashford. Tonight, the river carries secrets. A golden-haired heiress pulled from its depths, her death staged as accident, but whispered as murder. Detective Drake Vane steps into the fog, where wealth hides envy, and the circle's hand may be steering unseen. This is the Drowned Heiress. If you're drawn into Ashford's mysteries, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these shadows alive.
The River Thames shimmered beneath a pale, mist-laden morning, the fog clinging to the edges of the water like secrets that refused to rise. Drake Vane stood at the riverbank, steel-gray eyes scanning the scene with the quiet patience of a man who had seen enough chaos to know it often announced itself in the smallest details. A police cordon flapped gently in the wind, and a few onlookers murmured among themselves, craning their necks over the yellow tape. Beyond it, half submerged in the river's shallow eddies, floated the body of a young woman, her golden hair streaked dark with water. Drake's fingers brushed the small folding knife in his coat pocket, a silent reassurance of discipline and focus. He knelt, crouching just outside the cordon, observing the body from a distance without disturbing the scene. Drake, thinking, no signs of struggle on the surface, yet the way she lies, it's deliberate. Positioning, perhaps staged. Accidental drowning? Unlikely. Drake moved closer, ignoring the curious gaze of constables and onlookers. He noted the angle of her body in the water, feet facing upstream, head downstream. No visible bruising or marks aside from minor abrasions consistent with river debris. The water around her hands disturbed, as though she had tried to grip something, or someone had positioned her there. Clothing, expensive yet waterlogged, suggesting she had not dressed for swimming. Drake, thinking, this wasn't an accident. Someone wanted it to appear so, but overlooked subtle details. Even in staging, the truth shows. The constable in charge approached, a nervous man with furrowed brows. Constable, Detective Vane, what do you make of it? Drake, calmly, the river tells a story. Bodies do not float like this naturally unless there is intervention. This was deliberate. We need to understand her relationships, movements before death, and any potential witnesses. Constable, hesitant, she's Marguerite Lyle, heiress to the Lyle shipping fortune. Came from a prominent family, recently returned from a continental trip. No known enemies, sir. At least none obvious. Drake's expression remained unreadable. Drake, thinking wealth and prominence rarely mean safety. They attract desire, jealousy, and opportunity in equal measure. This accident is likely a carefully orchestrated murder. Drake began by questioning household staff and family members. Marguerite had returned from a short trip abroad only 3 days prior. She had been seen on the riverbank late at night, speaking to an unknown man near the private dock. Staff were vague, some hesitant, others downright evasive. Drake, thinking, hesitation is often the first clue. People lie to protect themselves, or someone else. Every slip, every pause, every glance away carries meaning. The gardener mentioned a recent dispute between Marguerite and her cousin, Gerald Lyle, over inheritance arrangements. Though presented as minor, Drake noted it as a potential motive. Drake moved along the riverbank, examining the dock, a small boat tied loosely to a post, and the muddy edges where footprints might be visible. He found a set of prints leading toward the river that did not match any staff. A scuff mark on a wooden post, suggesting a brief struggle or positioning of the body. Traces of a fine powder, possibly a residue from gloves or clothing. Drake, thinking, the killer left subtle evidence, either through haste or overconfidence. These are the threads we will follow. By mid-afternoon, Drake had mapped the key suspects. 1. Family members, motives linked to wealth, inheritance, and rivalry. 2. Staff, potential knowledge of household routines and river access. 3. Unknown visitor, seen with Marguerite at the private dock. Drake, thinking, we have the who, the when, and potential why. Now we need the how. Bodies tell stories silently, but people speak if observed carefully. The Lyle estate loomed over the river, a grand silhouette of stone and ivy against the gray morning sky. Drake Vane's footsteps echoed along the cobbled pathway as he approached the house, notebook in hand, mind cataloging every detail from the riverbank scene. The mist lingered in the gardens, curling around the hedges like cautious whispers. Drake was ushered into the drawing room, where Gerald Lyle, the cousin previously mentioned, sat stiffly in a high-backed chair. His posture suggested control, yet his eyes betrayed unease. Drake, calm, measured Mr. Lyle. I understand your grief, but I need to ask questions. Your cousin's death was no accident. I need to know everything about her last days. Gerald, guarded, I have nothing to hide, detective. Marguerite, she was headstrong, independent. She argued with me, yes, about the inheritance, but I never wished her harm. Drake observed Gerald closely. The slight tremor in his fingers, the micropause before his words, the almost imperceptible flinch when the river was mentioned. Drake, thinking, control masks insecurity, and hesitation hides more than fear. Every reaction is a footprint. Next, Drake questioned the staff individually. The butler, an elderly man with precise manners, recounted Marguerite's late-night excursions to the private dock, a visitor who arrived the evening before her death, unknown to the family. Odd behavior from the gardener, who seemed nervous when mentioning the river. Drake, thinking, the staff often know more than they realize. Their discomfort often points directly to the truth, or someone they seek to protect. The maid, young and timid, added, Maid, I saw Marguerite arguing with someone near the boathouse a few nights ago. I didn't see the person clearly. Tall, hat low, but she looked scared. Drake noted this carefully. Fear, even momentary, often precedes fatal actions. Drake walked along the private dock and the surrounding bank. He crouched, inspecting the muddy edges for prints, scuff marks, or signs of struggle. He found partial boot prints leading from the estate toward the river, distinct from both staff and family footwear. A small, snapped rope tied to a mooring post, recently cut. Tiny flecks of a metallic residue, suggesting perhaps a tool used to manipulate a boat or dock equipment. Drake, thinking the killer needed access, and they planned it carefully. Every step shows preparation, yet even the most meticulous leave marks. Back inside the estate, Drake pieced together family tensions. Gerald Lyle had recently contested Marguerite's control over a minor but profitable family shipping venture. Other distant relatives had hinted at financial gains if Marguerite's claim were removed. Marguerite herself had grown cautious, hinting at fears she did not share fully with anyone. Drake, thinking money and power rarely exist without envy and resentment. Motive is present in more than one person, opportunity in more than one place. Drake also scrutinized mundane details that seemed innocuous but held significance. A freshly polished boat paddle in the boathouse, oddly positioned. Wet footprints that ended abruptly, suggesting someone returned via another path. A note found tucked into Marguerite's desk drawer, cryptic, partially smudged, mentioning a meeting by the river. Drake, thinking, the killer assumed no one would notice these small signs. Yet they are the threads we will pull to unravel the entire tapestry. As Drake stepped onto the balcony overlooking the river, the wind carried the faint scent of riverweed and distant coal smoke from the city. He replayed the fragments of information in his mind. Marguerite's fear near the boathouse, Gerald's hesitation and micro-expressions, staff observations and the mysterious visitor, evidence left at the dock and riverbank. Drake, thinking the murder was deliberate, staged as an accident, yet the threads converge: fear, motive, and opportunity. Soon, the river will reveal its final secret. Drake Vane returned to the Lyle estate at dusk, the mist curling along the riverbank like silent witnesses. The air carried a faint chill, dampening the edges of the estate gardens and bringing with it the subtle smell of the river, mud, algae, and something faintly metallic. Tonight, he would reconstruct the last hours of Marguerite Lyle's life. Drake began with the accounts he had already gathered. Marguerite returned from her continental trip 3 days prior. Staff reported seeing her by the private dock late in the evening the night before her death. A mysterious visitor had arrived shortly before she was last seen alive. He cross-referenced these with the riverbank evidence: footprints, scuff marks, and the snapped rope. Drake, thinking every detail must fit. Timing, movement, and opportunity converged to reveal the final act. The river whispers the truth if one listens carefully. Drake brought the gardener into the boathouse, gently pressing him for additional information. Drake, you mentioned seeing someone near the river that night. Can you describe them fully? Gardener, hesitant, tall, wore a dark coat, hat low. I only caught glimpses. I thought it was Mr. Gerald at first, but it didn't feel right. She looked frightened. Drake noted the gardener's unease. The way his eyes darted to the river, the nervous tapping of his fingers. Drake, thinking fear reveals more than observation. Even peripheral witnesses hold keys to reconstructing events. Drake examined the smudged note found in Marguerite's desk. Meet me at the water. Midnight. Alone. We must speak before it's too late. He deduced. The note was recent, likely written that day. Smudges suggested haste or nervousness while writing. Ink and paper were consistent with stationery from the estate, ruling out external delivery. Drake, thinking, she agreed to meet someone she trusted or feared. Someone she believed she could not refuse. That meeting sealed her fate. Drake investigated the visitor reported by the staff. Using the staff descriptions and prints at the riverbank, he identified footwear size and tread pattern, partial fingerprints on the rope and boathouse door, evidence of handling the boat paddle recently polished. He compared these to family members, known acquaintances, and staff. One pattern emerged. The visitor had intimate knowledge of both the house routines and the river dock, narrowing the suspect pool considerably. Drake, thinking opportunity alone is insufficient, knowledge must accompany access. Whoever met Marguerite had both. Drake spent hours inside the boathouse, noting subtle details. Scratches on the wooden floor, suggesting a struggle or hurried movement. Muddy footprints leading to a small rowboat, now tethered awkwardly. A faint, almost imperceptible residue on the rope, possibly soil from shoes or gloves. He reconstructed the sequence. 1. Marguerite arrived, carrying a small satchel. 2. Visitor followed or intercepted her, perhaps under pretense or coercion. 3. Minor struggle ensued, enough to leave marks but not immediately lethal. 4. Body placed or allowed to drift into the river to simulate an accident. Drake, thinking, the killer understood how to manipulate appearances. It was not a crime of passion, but one of calculation. Drake considered the mental state of both victim and perpetrator. Marguerite had trusted the visitor, explaining her willingness to meet alone. The killer relied on control through fear and deception, staging the river scene to minimize suspicion. Minor errors, footprints, residue, staff observations, would ultimately betray them. Drake, thinking methodical planning rarely equates to perfection. Human error, even in the most calculated acts, leaves invisible threads. Drake reviewed the list of suspects: family members, staff, and occasional visitors. A new name surfaced: an old family attorney who had been present during Marguerite's continental trip and had expressed subtle objections to her recent financial decisions. Drake, thinking, someone with knowledge of both Marguerite's movements and financial concerns. The pieces are converging. Motive, opportunity, and psychological manipulation are aligning. The early morning fog clung to the Lyle estate as Drake Vane returned to the riverbank. The stillness of the water mirrored the tension building in his mind. Every step along the damp grass reminded him that this case was no ordinary accident. Every detail whispered secrets, waiting for him to unravel them. Drake began by reviewing Marguerite's recent financial decisions. She had recently shifted control of a small but lucrative shipping venture from her cousin Gerald to a trusted foreign partner. Several family members had expressed dissatisfaction, subtly threatening legal action to reclaim control. Unexplained transfers of minor sums from her personal accounts raised questions about external influence or pressure. Drake, thinking wealth always attracts manipulation. Jealousy, ambition, and fear often mingle in dangerous ways. Whoever wanted Marguerite dead likely saw both opportunity and gain. Drake found Gerald in the library, thumbing through old ledgers, trying to maintain composure. Drake, I need clarity about your last interactions with Marguerite. You had disagreements, but did any escalate beyond words? Gerald, hesitant, we argued about finances, about the estate. But I respected her decisions. I didn't. Drake noted every hesitation, the slight narrowing of Gerald's eyes, the unsteady tone. Drake, thinking guilt and fear leave micro-expressions. Gerald fears being suspected, yet fear alone does not indicate guilt. Drake revisited the mysterious visitor seen by staff. Using partial fingerprints and footprint analysis from the boathouse, he identified a pattern. The visitor's prints partially matched the old family attorney, Mr. Percival Hargrove. Footwear analysis confirmed similar size and tread to one of Hargrove's known pairs. Staff recollections placed Hargrove near the river the night of Marguerite's death, though he claimed to be in the estate library. Drake, thinking opportunity aligns with knowledge. The attorney knew Marguerite's schedule, the layout of the estate, and her recent financial choices. The pattern fits too neatly to ignore. Drake investigated Hargrove's personal dealings. Previously managed finances for the Lyle family, including Marguerite's investments abroad. Held subtle influence over minor inheritance clauses that could benefit him indirectly if Marguerite were incapacitated. Had personal correspondence with Gerald expressing frustration over Marguerite's independent decisions. Drake, thinking not only access but motive, not only opportunity but influence. Hargrove may have seen Marguerite as an obstacle, an independent force threatening his control. Drake returned to the staff, asking carefully, Drake, was anyone unusual near the river recently, aside from family? Maid. I remember Mr. Hargrove walking near the boathouse once at twilight. He said he was checking the boats for maintenance, but it seemed odd. The others didn't know. Gardner. He came down once carrying a lantern. I thought he was just cautious. Didn't think much of it. Drake noted how minor actions, seemingly innocent, could now be reframed as subtle premeditation. Drake pieced together the timeline. 1. Marguerite receives cryptic note urging a midnight meeting by the river. 2. Hargrove, aware of her movements, positions himself near the dock. 3. Minor struggle and signs of manipulation in the boathouse and riverbank. 4. Body staged to appear as accidental drowning, while indirect clues remained for the observant. Drake, thinking, precision, planning, and subtle control. Hargrove orchestrated this to avoid suspicion, relying on the perceived innocence of the estate and family dynamics. Yet every calculated move leaves evidence, and every manipulation leaves a trace. Drake decided to gather concrete proof before confronting Hargrove directly. He needed clear confirmation of Hargrove's presence at the river, evidence linking him to the staged scene, testimony from staff without alerting the suspect. Drake, thinking Hargrove's confidence is his weakness. Belief in invisibility often precedes mistakes. Observation, patience, and timing will reveal the truth. The Lyle estate was cloaked in the dim light of early evening, its sprawling gardens and riverside paths shrouded in mist. Drake Vane moved quietly along the riverbank, noting the subtle disturbances in the mud and foliage, traces of someone who had passed this way recently. His steel-gray eyes scanned the surroundings, patient and unhurried, cataloging every irregularity. Drake had confirmed Hargrove as the primary suspect, but needed concrete proof of his actions the night Marguerite died. He began discreetly tracing Hargrove's recent movements, checking the boathouse logs, where maintenance work was recorded, reviewing estate delivery schedules, noting unusual visits by the attorney, speaking subtly with staff, eliciting minor admissions about Hargrove's presence near the dock. Drake, thinking opportunity alone is not enough. We need the combination of presence, motive, and direct action. Each piece must align. Under the fading light, Drake returned to the boathouse, examining the rowboat, the snapped rope, and the polished paddle. Careful observation revealed new details. Faint smudges of mud on the interior of the boat, inconsistent with normal use. Scratches on the wooden floor, suggesting hurried movement. Small traces of fibers from a dark overcoat, likely Hargrove's, caught in the crevices. Drake, thinking, he underestimated the persistence of observation. Even the smallest residue can tell a story if examined closely. Drake quietly spoke with the maid and gardener once more, approaching their recollections like pieces of a puzzle. Maid, I remember seeing Mr. Hargrove near the boathouse, lantern in hand. He looked around nervously. He didn't speak, just waited. Gardener, yes, and the next morning, footprints led away, but some seemed wiped away, as if he tried to erase them. Drake's notebook filled with precise sketches of footprint patterns, rope placement, and furniture positioning. Drake, thinking fear and concealment create opportunities to observe human error. Hargrove acted, but he left threads behind that will not be ignored. While reviewing Marguerite's estate documents, Drake discovered irregularities. A small inheritance clause would transfer benefits if Marguerite were incapacitated or missing. Hargrove, as family attorney, had knowledge of this clause and influence over execution. Transfers of minor funds to Hargrove's accounts had occurred, likely unnoticed amidst estate management. Drake, thinking motive and opportunity converge once more. The financial incentive, while subtle, explains both the precision of the act and the calculated risk of staging an accident. Drake noticed a subtle discrepancy in the timeline from staff statements. Footprints indicated the body was moved post-mortem. A lantern was used, but staff reported no lights on in the boathouse. Small disturbances in the riverbank suggested deliberate manipulation of the body's final position. Drake, thinking he needed control of the scene, the perception, the story. And yet, control leaves evidence if one looks carefully. Drake decided it was time to confront Hargrove indirectly, without alerting him. He planned 1. Secure undeniable proof linking Hargrove to the boathouse and riverbank that night. 2. Re-examine the river path with photographic and observational evidence. 3. Prepare staff testimony to corroborate findings without tipping Hargrove off. Drake, thinking Hargrove's confidence is his vulnerability. He believes in the invisibility of careful planning, yet patience and observation will expose every misstep. The fog had lifted from the Lyle estate by dawn, leaving a crisp, almost biting chill in the air. Drake Vane moved along the riverbank with the same patient precision that had guided him through every case, his steel-gray eyes noting every disturbance in mud, grass, and river debris. Today, he would piece together the final moments that led to Marguerite Lyle's death. Drake crouched by the water's edge, studying the currents and eddies where Marguerite's body had been found. The river's slow flow revealed subtle clues. Debris lines suggested where she had entered the water. Disturbed reeds indicated a struggle or deliberate positioning. Footprints leading from the dock into the estate gardens told a story of approach and retreat. Drake, thinking bodies tell stories silently, yet clearly. The position, surrounding debris, and water currents indicate deliberate placement. This was no accident. It was a carefully orchestrated drowning. Drake returned to the gardener and the maid for precise reconstructions of Hargrove's movements. Gardener: I saw him near the dock, lantern in hand. He didn't make a sound, but he seemed tense. Then he left footprints leading away, wiping them near the garden path. Maid: he never spoke, but I remember the look on her face when she went down. Fear, hesitation. She trusted him, I think. Drake made meticulous notes of footwear impressions, lantern positions, and timing discrepancies, slowly constructing a detailed timeline. Drake examined the rowboat and the snapped rope once more. Small but significant details emerged. A few fibers from Hargrove's coat were caught in the rope. Mud smudges suggested the boat had been used recently, not just for staging. Minor scratches on the boat's hull matched marks found on the riverbank debris. Drake, thinking, these small traces corroborate staff testimonies. Hargrove's presence at critical points is undeniable. The river itself provides irrefutable evidence. Drake considered the psychological profile of the attorney. Methodical, calm, and reliant on perceived invisibility. Motivated by financial gain and subtle influence over family affairs. Confident that careful planning would prevent suspicion. Drake, thinking, confidence is a double-edged sword. Overconfidence blinds one to tiny, telling mistakes. Hargrove relied on fear and routine to mask his actions, yet he underestimated observation. By mid-morning, Drake had pieced together the final sequence. 1. Marguerite receives the cryptic note and plans a midnight meeting by the river. 2. Hargrove positions himself, lantern ready, using knowledge of estate routines. 3. A confrontation occurs, possibly verbal, possibly subtle coercion, leading Marguerite toward the water. 4. The struggle is minimal but leaves physical traces in mud, scratches, and footprints. 5. Hargrove stages the body, ensuring the scene appears accidental, while failing to erase all minor residues. Drake, thinking every act deliberate, every trace accounted for, except for the things humans leave unconsciously: fear, hesitation, and small mistakes. Drake gathered photographic evidence of the riverbank, boathouse, and footprints. He mapped out the timeline, corroborated by staff observations and forensic details. Drake, thinking, confrontation requires certainty. With everything documented, Hargrove cannot deny presence or intent. The case will close with facts, not speculation. Drake paused by the river, looking at the gentle flow of water where Marguerite's life had ended. Drake, thinking, the river witnessed truth, and truth is patient. All that remains is to present it clearly, to unmask the manipulation, the calculated fear, and the carefully hidden intent. Evening settled over the Lyle estate, the gardens cloaked in the deepening gray of twilight. Drake Vane moved quietly through the corridors, notebook tucked in his coat, eyes alert to every creak of floorboard and whisper of wind through the open windows. Tonight, he would confront Percival Hargrove, not recklessly, but with the precision born of careful observation and accumulated evidence. Drake invited Hargrove to the estate library under the guise of discussing final estate matters. The room was warm, lined with shelves of ledgers and law books, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows. Drake, calm, measured, Mr. Hargrove, thank you for meeting with me. I understand your concern over the recent events involving Miss Lyle. I wish to clarify some matters with you before the authorities proceed further. Hargrove, a tall man with sharp features, tried to mask his unease with a polite smile, but subtle tension betrayed him. Hargrove, of course, Detective Vane. Anything to clear misunderstandings. Drake noted the slight twitch in Hargrove's hand as he reached for a ledger, the way his eyes flicked toward the window overlooking the river. Drake began methodically. Footprints leading from the estate to the river and back, partially wiped but clearly identifiable. Fibers from Hargrove's coat caught in the boathouse rope. Minor scratches on the rowboat and riverbank debris aligning with Hargrove's presence. Staff testimonies placing him near the boathouse during critical hours. Drake, every thread points to a single conclusion, Mr. Hargrove. The evidence is consistent, chronological, and undeniable. Your presence, your actions, and your manipulation are documented. Hargrove's composed expression faltered slightly, a flicker of color rising to his cheeks. Hargrove, detective, you have no proof. Circumstantial, at best. Anyone could have orchestrated the scene. Drake, steadily, circumstantial evidence becomes incontrovertible when every thread converges. Motive, opportunity, and method. The river, the boathouse, and the staff observations all point to the same reality. Drake shifted focus to Hargrove's psychological patterns. Drake, you relied on fear, routine, and invisibility to stage an accident. You believed trust would mask intent. Yet even in the most controlled situations, human error persists. Hesitation, micro-expressions, residual traces. These betray the orchestrator. Hargrove's composure cracked further, his hands trembled slightly, and he avoided direct eye contact. Drake, thinking, confidence is often a mask for guilt. Hargrove's precision was almost perfect, but he underestimated the patience of observation. Drake leaned forward slightly, voice low and measured. Drake, there is one path forward, Hargrove. Confess now, and it will mitigate complications. Deny, and the cumulative evidence leaves no room for doubt. Hargrove swallowed hard, eyes darting between Drake and the ledger-strewn table. After a tense pause, Hargrove, quietly, I only meant to frighten her, to control her decisions. I did not intend the fall, the water. It was supposed to be a warning. Drake's eyes remained steady, unflinching. Drake, a warning, yes, but warnings in fear's language often become lethal. Your calculation failed at the moment of action. The river now bears witness. Drake pressed further, aware that Hargrove may not have acted alone. Drake, was anyone else involved, knowingly or unknowingly? Staff, family, or outside parties? Hargrove hesitated, his pride battling fear. Hargrove, no one. I acted alone. Everyone else, they knew nothing. Drake made careful notes, recognizing that corroborated or disproved, This admission would be crucial in prosecution. Drake instructed the estate staff to remain nearby but unobtrusive, ensuring that Hargrove could not tamper with any evidence. Drake, thinking, the confrontation must not provoke rash acts. Every movement, every word must preserve integrity of evidence. Precision, patience, and calm ensure justice, not theatrics. As Hargrove was escorted under Drake's supervision to await formal questioning by the authorities, the detective lingered at the library window. The river glimmered faintly in the moonlight, silent and impartial. Drake, thinking, the manipulator has been unmasked, yet the echoes of fear and deception linger. Observation has prevailed, but human nature, its errors, its ambition, remains constant. The river, as always, bears witness. The morning light filtered weakly through the tall windows of the Lyle Estate Library, casting long shadows across the rows of books and ledgers. Drake Vane sat at the large oak table, meticulously reviewing the details gathered so far. Hargrove's partial confession had shifted the investigation, but Drake knew that every claim required verification before it could form the foundation of justice. Drake began by aligning Hargrove's statements with physical evidence. The footprints from the estate to the river matched Hargrove's shoe size and tread pattern. Fibers from his coat were found on the snapped rope and boat, consistent with the timeline. Minor scratches on the rowboat and riverbank debris corroborated his movements near the boathouse. Drake, thinking, every thread of his confession aligns with what the river and the estate have silently recorded. The narrative fits the observed reality, yet subtle details may reveal more. Drake returned to the staff, seeking confirmation of Hargrove's movements and behavior. Maid. He was quiet that night, almost too quiet. The lantern. He moved slowly, carefully. I thought he was just cautious. Gardener. The footprints. I remember noticing them were irregular. Some steps were hurried, others careful. It didn't make sense at the time. Drake noted each nuance, the varied stride, the calculated pacing. These observations matched the reconstructed sequence of events. Drake, thinking, observation often precedes understanding. Staff recollections, though imperfect, corroborate the physical evidence and reveal intent. Drake scrutinized the estate's ledgers and correspondence. Transfers to Hargrove's accounts from minor estate funds were flagged as unusual but subtle. Clauses in Marguerite's will and shipping agreements suggested that incapacitation, not death, could benefit him temporarily, adding complexity to motive. Hargrove had been aware of these clauses and the timing of her return, making opportunity and planning converge. Drake, thinking, motive is layered: financial gain, influence, and the preservation of control. The more subtle the gain, the more deliberate the act. Using all available evidence, Drake pieced together the final moments. 1. Marguerite receives the cryptic note and heads to the river. 2. Hargrove positions himself near the dock, lantern in hand, controlling the approach. 3. A confrontation ensues, words exchanged, subtle coercion applied. 4. Marguerite resists slightly. Minor struggle leaves scratches and disturbed footprints. 5. She falls into the water, either pushed or losing balance under duress. 6. Hargrove stages the scene, ensuring it appears accidental while attempting to remove traces of his presence. Drake, thinking, the river and the boathouse bear silent witness. Even in attempts to conceal, truth leaves its mark. While reviewing the boathouse layout, Drake noticed a small detail overlooked. A second set of footprints, partially erased, suggested someone else had briefly entered the scene, possibly unnoticed by staff. These prints were smaller, likely female, and led from the garden to the river and back. Drake, thinking, Hargrove acted, yes, but alone? Perhaps not. Minor accomplices or opportunistic witnesses may have interacted with the scene. This could explain discrepancies in staff observations and residue evidence. Drake began compiling a complete dossier. Physical evidence linking Hargrove to the riverbank, boathouse, and rowing equipment. Corroborated staff testimonies. Timeline reconstruction matching footprints, scratches, and environmental evidence. Financial motive and legal influence over estate affairs. Drake, thinking the cumulative weight of evidence must be undeniable. Justice requires clarity, precision, and unassailable documentation. The river tells no lies, but humans sometimes attempt them. As he stepped outside to survey the river once more, Drake reflected on the intricate layers of human behavior and crime. Drake, thinking greed, fear, and control converge in ways both subtle and deadly. Observation and patience reveal every manipulation. Soon, the full story will emerge, leaving nothing hidden beneath the surface. The morning fog had returned to the Lyle estate, clinging to the gardens and riverbank like a thin veil concealing secrets. Drake Vane walked slowly along the edge of the river, notebook in hand, eyes scanning every disturbance in the mud, reeds, and stones. The second set of footprints, partially erased but still discernible, had become his focus. Drake crouched, tracing the faint impressions with gloved fingers. Smaller than Hargrove's, likely female. Led from the garden to the riverbank and then back toward the estate. Abruptly disappeared near a hedge, suggesting someone either left the scene quickly or retraced steps carefully. Drake, thinking someone else was present, unknown to staff, unnoticed at the time. Their interaction with the river or the body may have been brief, yet critical. Drake questioned the maid and gardener with renewed focus. Maid. I remember seeing a figure moving near the hedge late that night. I thought it was a shadow, maybe the wind. I didn't realize. Gardener. Yes, now that you mention it, I saw a woman's silhouette near the dock. She seemed hesitant, almost frightened. Drake made careful sketches of both the riverbank and hedge paths, noting distances, angles of observation, and possible vantage points. Drake, thinking fear often dictates subtle movement. This person avoided detection but left traces. Even the cautious leave evidence. Drake began considering who might have been present. Close friends or confidants of Marguerite, possibly aware of her meetings. Staff with knowledge of the estate and river access. Family members seeking to maintain appearances while manipulating events. He cross-referenced names with travel logs, visitor records, and recent correspondence. One name surfaced repeatedly: Eliza Wren, a personal companion of Marguerite and confidant during her continental trip. Drake, thinking Eliza had motive to protect Marguerite, opportunity to approach the river unnoticed, and reason to leave without drawing attention. Her presence explains the secondary footprints. Drake arranged a discreet meeting with Eliza at the estate's drawing room. She was composed, yet her eyes betrayed unease as he approached. Drake, Miss Wren, I need your assistance in clarifying the events surrounding Miss Lyle's death. Your cooperation is vital to understanding the full sequence. Eliza, hesitant, I was there, yes. But I only intended to speak with Marguerite, to warn her about Hargrove. I did not anticipate what happened. Drake listened intently, noting posture, speech patterns, and subtle micro-expressions that revealed fear mixed with genuine concern. Eliza described her actions. She followed Marguerite to the river after receiving a cryptic message herself, concerned about Hargrove's intentions. Observed Hargrove near the dock, lantern in hand, attempting to manipulate Marguerite. Approached cautiously, hoping to intervene, but remained hidden behind foliage. witnessed the struggle that led to Marguerite falling into the water, but was too far to prevent it. Drake, thinking her presence clarifies the secondary footprints, confirms the struggle, and adds context to the riverbank disturbances. She did not contribute to the crime, but she witnessed its critical moments. Drake compared Eliza's account with physical evidence. Footprints matched her smaller shoe size. The partial disturbance near the hedge aligned with her hidden vantage point. Observations of Hargrove's positioning and the minor struggle were consistent with riverbank traces. Drake, thinking corroboration is key. Witnesses, even peripheral, validate physical evidence and reconstruct human interactions. The river has recorded truth through footprints and traces. With Hargrove's confession, Eliza's corroboration, and detailed evidence from the riverbank and boathouse, Drake began drafting a comprehensive narrative. Motive: Hargrove's financial and legal influence, desire for control. Opportunity: knowledge of estate routines and river access. Method: staged accident, manipulation of the river scene. Witness: Eliza, observing without intervening. Evidence: footprints, fibers, scratches, staff testimonies, and financial records. Drake, thinking every detail converges. The story is complete, precise, verifiable, and irrefutable. The river, once silent, now speaks in every footprint and disturbance. The Lyle estate had grown quiet under the afternoon sun, the river glinting faintly as Drake Vane gathered his evidence into a meticulous dossier. Every detail, every footprint, every fiber and testimony had been cross-checked and verified. Today, the truth would be laid bare, not with assumption, but with unassailable precision. Drake arranged a meeting in the drawing room, ensuring all critical parties were present. Percival Hargrove, tense but feigning calm. Gerald Lyle, anxious and impatient. Eliza Wren, the confidant and witness. Estate staff, who had been discreetly asked to observe and recall details if necessary. Drake's demeanor was steady, measured, his steel-gray eyes scanning each individual as he prepared to narrate the full sequence of events. Drake. The events of that night were deliberate. Miss Lyle received a cryptic note, urging her to meet at the river alone. Mr. Hargrove, aware of her movements and motivated by control and financial interest, positioned himself strategically to intercept her. Minor struggle occurred, leaving footprints, scratches, and subtle traces. The body was then staged to appear as an accidental drowning. He paused, letting each statement settle in the room like the mist along the riverbank. Drake, continuing, a secondary presence, Miss Wren, was near the riverbank. She attempted to observe and intervene without detection. Her testimony corroborates the sequence of events and validates the traces we have found. Hargrove's composure began to crack under Drake's unwavering delivery. Drake, the evidence, footprints, fibers, scratches, financial records, and staff testimonies, leaves no room for doubt. Your presence, your actions, and your intent are documented. Confession and cooperation now will prevent further complications. Hargrove's hands trembled. He averted his eyes, swallowing hard. Hargrove, I only meant to frighten her, to assert control. I didn't intend for her to fall. I never imagined. Drake, calm, measured, intent and consequence are inseparable. Your planning failed to anticipate human unpredictability, and the river has recorded the truth. Drake turned to Eliza Wren. Drake, Miss Wren, your presence at the riverbank and your observation of the events corroborate the physical evidence. Without your account, reconstructing the sequence would have been incomplete. Your testimony is invaluable. Eliza nodded, her voice steady despite her earlier apprehension. Eliza, I saw everything. I tried to warn her, but I was too far. I never intended for this to happen. Drake, thinking her honesty and courage in coming forward are crucial. Witnesses often hold the final pieces of the puzzle, even if indirect. Drake compiled the final dossier. Timeline reconstruction from cryptic note to drowning. Staff testimonies and witness corroboration. Physical evidence at boathouse and riverbank. Financial motive and legal influence. Confession and psychological profile of Hargrove. He presented the dossier to the local authorities with detailed recommendations for formal charges. Drake, thinking, precision, patience, and observation culminate in irrefutable clarity. Justice does not demand vengeance, it demands truth. Gerald Lyle, though relieved at the resolution, struggled with conflicting emotions. Gerald, Percival, I cannot believe it. I trusted him. Drake nodded, empathetic yet firm. Drake, trust can be exploited, Mr. Lyle. What matters now is clarity and accountability. The truth, once revealed, allows for both justice and reflection. Before leaving the estate, Drake spoke privately with Eliza. Drake, you played a difficult role, Miss Wren. Your courage in observing, not interfering recklessly, allowed the evidence to speak for itself. Eliza, I only wanted to protect her. I hope justice is enough. Drake, thinking, it is, for now. The river keeps its witness, and the truth endures. The Ashford dusk fell heavy, amber lamps flickering to life along Roseward Hill as Drake Vane returned from the Lyle estate. The river's murmur still echoed in his ears, the confession still sharp in his mind. Yet, for Drake, a solved case never ended with the arrest. People lived with the aftermath, and the aftermath often revealed truths darker than the crime itself. The Lyle estate was subdued in the days after Percival Hargrove's confession. Servants walked softly, voices hushed. The grand rooms, once alive with chatter, now felt mausoleum-like. Gerald Lyle wore a fractured composure, part relief, part shame. Drake visited once more, both to finalize statements and to observe. Gerald, quietly, pouring a glass of sherry. I never thought Percival capable of this. He was like family. More than that, he knew every corner of this house, every secret. Drake, steady. That familiarity was his weapon. The most dangerous betrayals come not from strangers, but from those closest. Gerald looked down into his drink, eyes hollow. Gerald, truth feels like ash, detective. Justice may be served, but I am left to sweep up the remains. Eliza Wren sought Drake out before he left. Her nerves still lingered beneath the calm facade. Eliza, detective, I've told you everything, but it doesn't feel enough. If I had shouted, if I had run to her faster. Drake, soft, firm. Guilt lingers long after innocence is proven. You bore witness, Miss Wren. Without you, the truth would have drowned alongside her. You did not fail her. You gave her voice. Her eyes welled, but her spine straightened. Eliza, I'll remember that. Still, there are things in this house, detective. Things unsaid. Watch Gerald. He hides sorrow, but also fear. Drake filed that warning silently. Back in Ashford Core, Drake sat in his modest flat above the tea shop, notebook open. The case had been closed neatly, too neatly. Hargrove's motives were clear: money, control, ego. Yet, Drake's instincts whispered something more. The cryptic note that lured the victim to the river still gnawed at him. Its phrasing bore the cadence of influence, crafted to manipulate. While Hargrove confessed to the crime, Drake doubted he authored the message himself. Drake, thinking. The words felt refined, calculated, as if someone else orchestrated the first step, then let Hargrove carry the weight. He drew a quiet connection to past cases, instances where Ashford's shadowy circle seemed to hover just beyond reach. They thrived on manipulation, pulling strings, letting others take the fall. Drake returned to the holding cells before Hargrove's transfer. He found the man haggard, stripped of his usual arrogance. "Drake, you confessed to the act. But the note, did you write it?" Hargrove's eyes flickered, a tiny betrayal of fear. "Hargrove, it doesn't matter now. I played my part." Drake, leaning closer, voice low. "Someone guided you. Someone nudged you forward. Who?" Hargrove clamped his jaw shut. His silence was not denial. It was protection. Drake, thinking. Even in ruin, loyalty to the circle binds tighter than truth. That night, Drake walked the tramlines, coal smoke curling above him, lamps casting long shadows. He thought of the river, of the note, of Hargrove's silence. Drake, thinking. Justice is never singular. Behind one man's guilt hides another's hand. The circle remains unseen, their games endless. Today, the law won. Tomorrow, the city's shadows will ask for more. As he lit a rare cigarette, his brass watch ticking softly, Drake knew the case was over on paper, but not in truth. Drake closed his notebook, the final line written with care. The river drowned her body, but the city drowns its truth. One name confessed, but a shadow remains unnamed. He snapped the book shut, exhaled smoke into the cold night, and waited for Ashford's next call. Ashford's nights had a way of settling deep into the bones. Smoke from the tramlines clung to the air, lamps burned low, and the hum of the furnace quarter echoed like a heartbeat no one wanted to acknowledge. Drake Vane stood at his window above the tea shop, coat draped across a chair, notebook open on the sill. One last entry waited to be written. Though Percival Hargrove's confession had sealed the case, Drake knew the city didn't deal in neat endings. Too much had lingered. Eliza Wren's warning about Gerald's fear, Hargrove's silence over the note, and the circle's shadow. At the precinct, the captain had clapped him on the back, muttering something about "fine work, soldier," but Drake had only nodded. His instincts were restless. He spent the following days quietly tracing small threads, questioning the servants, revisiting the riverside where the body had been found. It was there, by the iron railing where the water lapped against stone, that he noticed something everyone else had overlooked: faint chalk markings on the wall. Not fresh, but deliberate. A sigil. A circle, cut through by a diagonal slash. The circle's mark. 2 evenings later, Eliza Wren found him in a tram cafe. She looked lighter, though her eyes still carried the memory of Roseward's shadows. "Eliza, I'm leaving Ashford, detective. Taking a position in Brighton, far from rivers and estates. This city, it eats people alive." Drake, quietly. "Sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do." She hesitated, then slid a folded slip of paper across the table. "Eliza, before I go, you should see this. It was slipped under my door 2 nights ago." Drake unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. The words chilled him. "The circle watches. The circle rewards silence." He looked up, but Eliza only shook her head. "Eliza, I won't be silent, but I won't stay either." Drake pocketed the note, eyes heavy with thought. Later, in the dim drawing room of Roseward Hill, Gerald Lyle sat across from Drake, his hands trembling as he poured 2 whiskeys. "Gerald, you must know, detective, that Percival was not the mind behind it all. He was arrogant, yes, but never clever. Someone else steered him. Drake, careful. You speak as though you've seen their hand. Gerald's voice broke into a whisper. Gerald, I have. Once, years ago, when my father still lived. A man with no name, no face, just the circle's sigil etched into correspondence. They offered money, protection, influence, and my family accepted. We've lived under their shadow ever since. Drake sipped his whiskey slowly, letting the silence settle. Drake, the circle didn't drown her. Hargrove did, but they put the river in motion. They'll do it again. Gerald nodded, despair in his eyes. That night, Drake walked the tramlines again. The city was quiet, but its silence was never peace. It was plotting, waiting. He lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl upward and vanish against the black sky. He pulled out his notebook and wrote the last lines of the case. Justice, they say, is done. Yet the circle's hand leaves no fingerprints, only echoes. The river may forget faces, but it remembers lies. And so must I. He closed the book, tucked it into his coat, and slipped his brass watch back into his pocket. The camera of the city widened around him. Tram bells clanging in the distance, furnaces roaring faintly from the quarter, fog rolling across the cobblestones. Drake Vane walked alone, coat drawn tight, his shadow long against the gaslight. Not triumphant, not defeated, simply steady. Because in Ashford, the river never stopped pulling, and neither would he.
You've just heard The Drowned Heiress, an original tale of Drake Vane and the city that never sleeps, written for Audible Archives. I'm Rob, your host, and as Ashford reminds us, even rivers remember lies. If this story gripped you, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Every gesture helps us bring the next mystery to life. Until then, stay vigilant, stay listening.
Another chapter closes, but the archives remain, waiting for the next seeker of stories. Here, no voice is lost, no tale truly ends. This is Audible Archives. Until we meet again, may your mind wander freely and your heart never forget the stories we share.